Welcome back to the Coast to Coast podcast here on InsideCarolina.com. I'm Joey Powell, and this show is brought to you by Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com. Longtime supporters of Inside Carolina, family-owned, alumni-operated, just absolute great folks. Check them out, JohnnyT-Shirt.com. You may have seen Nike released new official throwbacks from some of UNC's most notable players, including the head man on the bench, Tyler Hansbrough, and also Sean May, another guy that's on staff right now. You can get those at JohnnyT-Shirt.com. Check them out. We appreciate them sponsoring the show. And with that, let's get into it, coast to coast. All right. Appreciate you guys being here. I'm Joey Powell for Inside Carolina. With me, as always, Sherrell McMillan, Sean Moran. Fellas, how are you? Sean, what's up out there on the left coast?
Nice weather and another week on the emotional roller coaster that is UNC basketball.
Yeah, was the game as awful out there as it was here?
Yeah, because you had more time to think about it before you went to sleep.
Good point. Sherrell, how are you, man?
I'm good. No complaints.
No complaints. Well, that's I appreciate your cloak of positivity to enshroud us as we get started tonight. Fellas, let's just get it out of the way. Yes, the Tar Heels did beat Louisville in a game they absolutely had to have. And as you thought they might be able to carry some of that momentum and what they learned at Louisville into the game against arch rival Duke on Saturday, they absolutely did not. And there are plenty of things we can talk about, but I think the biggest are the Tar Heels lose their first game at home this year, drop to 8-4 in the conference, 16-7 on the year. They are still tied for fourth in the ACC with Miami, but Miami obviously has the tiebreaker as we record this right now. And importantly, they lose their 4-game winning streak. And as we've talked before, this team needs as many wins as they can get. But the biggest thing I'm taking away after watching that game against Duke, UNC is 0-7 in quad one games. And as we know now, that determines where you fall in the NCAA tournament if you get an at-large bid. And guys, the first thing I want to tee up for you, not only are they 0-7 in quad one games, they've been absolutely skull-dragged in a lot of those games. Sherrell, have you ever seen anything like this where a team seems to be able to beat less than or equal competition, but when it comes to teams that are better than they are talent-wise, they just absolutely wilt?
No. And it's there's not really much to say, honestly. I know we are tasked with putting together a weekly podcast on Carolina basketball, and people come to us to some degree for insights and knowledge and sourced information, but there's nothing that's happened with UNC basketball since Saturday that you can really explain. There were players who talked about following the game, talked about lack of energy, who talked about lack of effort. And I know they said that in the moment, but I don't really know if I can believe that, because it's just so unbelievable that it blows my mind that is true. It seemed like more guys just reaching for something because they don't know how to fix whatever is wrong. And I think they don't even know what the problem is. That's the main issue.
Yep.
You can't go about solving it without knowing what you're solving. And it seems systemic with this kind of core group of the guys who have been here for 2 years. We've talked about it several times. We're around right at 50 games, and they kind of are where they are at this point. I think we've seen it over and over. It's not a surprise. Like, the roller coaster goes up and the roller coaster goes down, depending upon, whether or not the team they're playing is good. It was interesting because it was two kind of streaks going against each other. They've been really good at home. They've played great defense at home. Darn near unbeatable at home the last 2 years, versus they can't beat anybody good. And we saw which one won out on Saturday. And, Duke is one of the teams, I think. I know I've got some grief for my talent comment, which I will not back down from, but Duke is one of those teams that has more talent than UNC. Still, it's a situation where I don't think anyone rational would say, oh man, they lost to Duke, that's terrible, because Duke is a very good team. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing with Kentucky, and the same thing with Tennessee, and the same thing with Miami, and the same thing with Wake Forest, is that you can lose games, but you cannot wilt and quiver and be down by 30 at home to Duke. That's just unacceptable. And I've seen people try to rationalize, like, oh, it's not that bad, don't overreact. No, they lost at home and were embarrassed at home to their arch rival, down by 30 points in the second half. That's just, it's not really comprehensible. And so I don't think any fan should get on another one for being upset and maybe going off the deep end after that game, because it's justified.
And I think one of the many things that are sticking in our fans and subscribers' craw right now are the fact that UNC was never in that game. For various reasons early on. And Sean, I want to come to you for a little bit of analysis. The matchup with Bacot on Paolo Banchero, I don't think anybody saw that coming. I know when we did Inside Carolina Live on Saturday to preview the game, Tommy Ashley and I, we kind of went back and forth as to who was going to end up guarding Banchero, whether it would be Leaky Black or whether it would be Brady Manick, but none of us saw Armando Bacot being that guy. And I think if you would have said coming into the game, the worst thing that the Tar Heels cannot have happen is for Armando Bacot to be taken out of the game, either due to foul trouble or for whatever. And of course, 3 minutes in, he's guarding Banchero. Granted, only one of those fouls was while he was guarding Banchero, but he was out of position, which caused his second foul. Sean, can you help us understand maybe what the logic would be behind that matchup? I'm not asking you to be Hubert Davis or the staff, but you watch a lot of basketball from a very in tune analytical perspective. Is there something there that maybe would have worked out in the Tar Heels' favor that maybe the staff saw that they thought they could exploit?
I mean, I think when I saw it, that first possession, I was pretty surprised. I think going into it, it was the question was, what's going to be the difference between Manick and Banchero on both sides of the ball? Because every team that plays UNC, they've been taking whoever's there for, and from the beginning looking to attack Manick. So. Yep. Obviously they knew Banchero would attack Manick, so wanted to get him off of him on kind of a non-offensive player, but at the same time putting Bacot, who is not a perimeter defender. Granted, that first shot that Banchero hit, I thought the defense was actually decent. It was just a good shot, which he does, but once again putting him in tough situations. But I think it goes to the question which we saw in the second half. And I, for one, had, probably slept on Griffin in terms of his talent level and his ability. Because, I mean, once they put Leaky on Banchero, for the most part, he shut him down until the end in an extremely impressive defensive performance. But then at the start of the second half, when you say, okay, they're only down 11, it would have been nicer if they'd been down 8 if RJ had hit one of those shots at the end or something to that extent. But it didn't really matter with how Duke came out and how UNC came out, with Duke attacking Manick now with Griffin. So, in that game, there's always going to be one significant mismatch. I think in the majority of past UNC Duke games, there always has been, how is UNC going to defend that 4 position? Whether it's Jason Tatum or whoever it is. Last year, with Matthew Hurt, it was a little easier because he wasn't going to, athletic enough to attack the basket. But here there's going to be that athletic mismatch, and, Duke exploited it both starts of the half.
Yeah. And when you're talking about, the mismatches, something I think that is also very frustrating when you're watching this team is the fact that this team is less than the sum of its parts. Sherrell alluded to it earlier. He's still going to stand on that mountain and talk about the talent that this team has collectively. But have you ever seen a group of players that together are not as good as the talent of individuals? Because I think that's what we're seeing right now. And you can look at it from an emotional or psychological standpoint, but I think just however you want to break it down, when you look at it, the players that are coming out for UNC right now seem to be less cohesive, and that's making the team performance less than what you would see with the talent. Do you have any ideas of what might be causing that?
I mean, last year they basically beat Duke by 20 at home. This year they lose to them by 20 at home. I think once again, from there is talent there from a name perspective. Obviously, it's big names, but when you're looking at UNC Duke, once again, you're not really talking about any NBA players from UNC's perspective. And Duke, you're looking at 4 potential first-round picks. Caleb Love is shooting 22% from the inside the 3-point line over the last 6-7 ACC games. RJ Davis struggled, the guards were 1 for 13 at the half. But I think, really they were, I knew defensively it would be a challenge, but I was surprised at how UNC came out offensively, looking, just not, out of sorts, which maybe you could expect at Cameron, but not at home, with Leaky taking a contested deep long jumper, which you thought had gotten out of his system, and then, forcing up threes, as opposed to, here's what we want to do on the first 3 possessions of either big hot down low or Brady and pick and pop. And, it was like a train running downhill, that it was just like, when is this going to stop? So, I don't know if it's chemistry, it is talent. But, there are issues, and it doesn't help when there isn't any bench, that's been developed either. And you've got Manic playing 41 and 35 minutes and was just absolutely gassed in the second half. So it's a good question, but there's definitely, once again, I think it goes to talent, and you can just look at who UNC offered in last year's class. They offered probably half of the top 20, didn't get any of them. And you have Duke with 3 of them, plus somebody like Mark Williams who returns, who was at the same rank as Day'Ron Sharp. And if you got Day'Ron in the NBA, so it's a pretty big talent mismatch, and it goes back to recruiting. So that was kind of a long-winded, windy answer, but a lot of thoughts obviously going on with where the status of the program is.
Sorry, man. Sometimes a postulate is not a very short answer, so I appreciate that. Sherrell, I think Sean hit the nail on the head, and I think, again, this is something else that longtime Carolina fans, longtime IC subscribers can't wrap their heads around. How is the talent gap so big between teams like Duke right now, to a point that North Carolina basketball, and as painful as it might be for folks to hear this, North Carolina basketball is nationally irrelevant. And I think they have been for a couple of years, and even more so if you can separate the fact that, they're going through a coaching change behind a Hall of Fame coach. What can they do to I guess, to mask those talent gaps? Is it, does it have to be bringing in some of these new guys? Is it going to be all about finding the right fit in the portal? Because a guy like Brady Manick, the 3 of us talked last year about what a huge, though he was kind of almost an afterthought from recruiting, what a huge asset Kerwin Walton was. Well, Brady Manick was an April ad this year, and I'm wondering what this team would look like without him. Sherrell, what can this team do to help bridge that talent gap, whether it's this year or kind of going towards next year? Is there anything that can kind of give Tar Heel fans a little bit of hope on the intermediate horizon?
This year, you would say the answer would be, we'll dig in and double down and work harder and try harder and do all those things. But this team has shown no interest really in doing that over the course of this season, and really dating back to last season. So you can't count on that. So I think you'll see them, beat teams who aren't good, play tough games against teams who are on par with them, and lose to teams who are better than them. Is that enough to get into the NCAA tournament? We'll see. We talked about 6-4 going down the stretch. Now Clemson's not a Q1. It wouldn't be a Q1 win anymore. So that is not great. They're going to have to defend their home court, and they're going to have to find 2 road wins somehow, some way. This year, I don't really see an answer this year. I think it just, not to be blasé, but it just kind of is what it is with this team. Maybe if they get in the tournament, maybe, somebody gets hot for a game or 2 and they get a win or 2 in the tournament. But I mean, I think that's far-fetched at this point. The goal is just trying to get into the tournament somehow. So, I think we'll just have to wait and see on that. As far as moving forward, I think you have to hope that the inverse is true moving forward, that even if you are a little bit less talented on paper, when it comes to recruiting rankings or transfer rankings or whatever, that the individuals play more cohesive and more as a team, and have more buy-in, and are together and kind of have a shared vision for where they want to go. You can overcome a lot when you are together and when you're working hard and being smart. And this team hasn't been able to do that. So I think that's the hope for next season, is depending upon who's back and who leaves, and once all that stuff clears, that they use the portal effectively again. I think, Hubert Davis should be commended for how Brady Manick turned out. Garcia and McCoy haven't quite turned out the way they expected, but I think we all agree they hit a home run with Manick. But yeah, you have to hit the portal, and then just hope that the cohesion can make up for maybe a little bit of a drop in overall talent that the team has. And I think moving forward, I think you'll see Hubert Davis as he starts to imprint himself on the program and on the team. I think you'll see him look for guys who will literally like bleed on the floor to win. I'm not talking figuratively, like cut me because I want to win. Yes, that's how much I want to win. I think he'll look for guys like that, which tend to be guys who are undervalued, people with chips on their shoulder who maybe were overlooked. I think that is the immediate path out, is to try to still go for the elites, but instead of going for guys who just outside of the elite, go for some of these guys who want to be there, who want to really play hard, and who want to do all the energy, effort, and toughness stuff that Hubert has talked about. That I think that's the quickest path out and path back to relevance, as you said. And then from there, if you can get one or two of the top 15 guys, then you can start getting things rolling again. But right now, it's just, we've talked about you shouldn't have to look in the mirror 7 times a season.
For so many times.
Yeah. I mean, stop looking in the mirror, just go do it. And they just aren't capable of it right now, I guess.
Well, that's one of the reasons, one of the many reasons you and I are absolute kindred spirits, because I actually, not that anybody cares, but for the purpose of this conversation, I actually tweeted yesterday after, about 2/3 of the way through the game, that North Carolina needs some dudes. You guys know how much of a fan I am of dudes, but North Carolina needs some guys that would rather win than breathe. And I think that's kind of your point when you talk about guys, cut me because I want to bleed and I want to win. Go ahead.
And it sounds cliche, like, oh, they're just running off of the mouth. But there are guys like that. Joey knows them. Sean knows them. There are people who will do anything it takes to win. And, I don't mean to assail the character of this current team, because I'm sure they're trying hard. And I know that they've worked hard to be in the position that they're in. But it's not consistent 1 through 13 on that roster. And I don't know how anyone could look at it and say that it is. So that's what to me, that's the path out, is you've got to stack the roster with more guys who are willing to do whatever it takes to win, and then try to additionally get that, top 10, top 15 talent to go with it.
In my mind, that also manifests itself as in, if you're comparing a guy who might have more talent with a guy who, is slightly less talented, but has that dog in him, you take the second guy, right?
Right. And again, I don't think it needs to be a permanent thing, because overall you want as much talent as you can get. But in this interim, as they go into the offseason, I think the program kind of has a hard reset, a soft reboot, if you will. Yeah. I think that's where you need to go, because that's going to build the culture. That's another thing. North Carolina program has not been good the last 3 years. Let's just be honest. And so losing and, bad habits and culture, that stuff is infectious. And not infectious in a bad way. It can fester and it can turn stuff bad quickly. And so you have to root out that kind of stuff. And people who care more about winning than themselves sometimes help to get rid of that stuff. I'm not saying that they have a systemic, culture issue, but I do think after 3 years, some stuff can start to pop up and stuff can start to grow, and you have to smash that out as quickly as possible.
One of the things that Tar Heel fans saw happen this past week was just a really tough performance from Caleb Love in 2 games. And Sean, I want to ask you this: when you have a player like Caleb Love, who is incredibly talented, who is incredibly gifted, actually, to rip off a Ted Lassoism, has the mind of a goldfish sometimes, in the sense that he's going to come back and be a hero regardless of what happens in the play before. He still has in his mind that he can change the game and make winning plays for his team every time down. But when he's in a funk like he was at the end of regulation against Louisville, and when he does things like he did in a couple of sequences against Duke, would it be better to bring him over and just park him for a little bit and let him watch to see what's happening in the game, if nothing else, maybe for a pattern interrupt?
Yeah, I mean, you would think, but so far we've yet for the most part to see it until until it's really too late. And with there's a few questions of, well, if you take him out, who's coming in? Because outside of RJ, they haven't developed anybody off the bench that they can count on or feel comfortable. He really is the only guy that can truly penetrate. I think it would help to get him, if he starts going in that direction, to sit him on the bench and talk to him before it spirals like we saw in Louisville. I think every now and then you see him attack and make a nice pass to Brady or Baycott, and you say, man, if he could just do that all the time. But once again, I mean, right now, you look at his 2-point numbers on the season, it's right on par where it was last year, 36%, which is horrific. 28% in the ACC. Obviously, he's been shooting the ball better from the 3-point line, but I think for him, it's like, okay, what do I feel comfortable doing? Maybe it's taking a pull up open jump shot, or if I can get to the lane and I can finish, do that. But if I don't have that, I'm either looking for a big man, or I'm kicking it back out versus forcing the issue, which seems to be his MO. And once again, just going back to, he's got great length, but he doesn't have great explosiveness, and that gets him in trouble when he does go off 1 foot and he is in traffic. So he's one of the highest usage players on the team. The ball's in his hands a lot, and you would hope to see kind of his game continue to grow, and I think that's needed by more timeouts during the game, or taking him out when he needs to sit. But so far we haven't seen that, so I wouldn't foresee it coming over the last stretch of games.
Well, I appreciate that insight. Again, I recognize that's it's kind of touchy when you're talking about, one specific player, because Caleb Love has been great at times this year. But again, when the lights have been brightest, at least this season, and you've had full stadiums, he's kind of had something just not click the way that you would expect it to for a guy that's as talented as he is. Sherrell, you mentioned it when we were talking before the show. That environment last night was absolutely amazing. I think that, for a program that has the history that North Carolina does, that's mired in kind of the change that they're going through right now, not only with the change in administration, but, that they've had 2 really, really subpar years, at least by this program standards. That atmosphere last night was really off the charts. Do you think that, you would think with the 12-0, and I know I'm kind of rambling, but stay with me here. With the 12-0 record going into last night, do you think that's something that they can get back if the fans can kind of stick with it and get them to, I guess, will this team to getting back to their winning ways at home, because they need every game from here on out that they can get? Do you think they can feed off of that the way they were prior to the Duke game? Do you think they can kind of just throw that out of their head?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's why I don't know if I know players said it, but I just don't know if I buy that they weren't into it or they didn't try hard, because you look at it and they were into it. The crowd was going crazy. And then Duke just punched them and they never got up. I mean, it was an instant knockout. It was, the hardest right cross possible, and Carolina's just on the mat and just didn't even try to get up. They were just down. And I think that is what the players start talking about when they talk about a lack of energy or lack of toughness or whatever. It's just Duke just overwhelmed them with talent and overwhelmed them with offensive ability and skill. But North Carolina made a little bit of a comeback there late in the first half. They were down by 23 and had a couple of shots to get it into single digits. And a lot of that, aside from Brady Manick, was just the sheer energy in the Smith Center, kind of telling people, telling the team to just, pick it up, let's go. Because you could tell they were ready to burst. They were ready to go wild. And that kind of home atmosphere is worth a few points. I mean, that's why Vegas always gives you a few points at home, because of the atmosphere. And I think even this year, and the last couple of games when there were fans last season, that's why, North Carolina probably needed a couple more, instead of 3, maybe give North Carolina 5 when they're at home, because it's much easier to shoot when everyone's supporting you. It's much easier to rebound. It's much easier to get your offense going when, there's 20,000 people yelling your name, wanting you to do well. And so that's where I'm at. I think we talked about, I hate to keep saying we talk about, but we've mentioned it, that was going to be a tough one at home. Their toughest game of the season left was at home. And so if they can just win out from here at home, I still think they have a good shot of making the NCAA tournament. But the Smith Center and the fans have to come back out next week against Florida State to really make a difference. People always say, I have no control over the Carolina game, and it runs my heart rate up, and I have to take my nerve pills, et cetera, et cetera. But there's a chance you can help out. If you go to the Smith Center and be loud, this is one of those teams where I really think, a couple of loud, times, a couple of loud 10 or 15 minutes could be the difference between the NCAA tournament and not.
I absolutely feel like that if RJ Davis hits that corner three with about a minute and a half left in the first against Duke and gets it under single digits, I think the roof would have exploded. But that's just one spectator's opinion. All right, 2 games this week. At Clemson on Tuesday at 6:00, which change your dinner plans or eat early, and then hosting Florida State next Saturday. Sean, what's one thing the Tar Heels need to get back to this week to win those games?
One thing they need to get back to, you want to say defense, but they haven't been a strong defensive team all year. I think it's just trying to be more consistent, especially in terms of working to take better shots within the flow of the offense and working to get Armando going early. Brady has been playing out of his mind offensively. The last several games, shooting close to 50% from three. Leaky has been playing better, but it's really going to be up. Once again, it kind of, as the guards go, the team goes, and if they can work to take better shots, I think that will definitely help. But once again, it was nice to get the win at Louisville. I would have liked to have seen when they did get that 10-point lead and they had a chance to get it to 12 before it all collapsed. But I think Clemson's right now on KenPom, they're projected to lose by 1 point. But that's the team from a talent perspective that Armando should have his way inside, and I think it's up to how the guards play. Starting out on the road, because Clemson has given them trouble lately, but it's really just going to be playing consistent offensively, and working to make sure the assist to turnover ratio is not negative.
Sherrell, same question. What's something that this team has to get back to win these 2 games this week?
I hate to agree, not hate to agree with John, but I agree with John in that I think it has to be offensively in the shooting, because the shooting was just so bad against Duke and to some degree in some of the other games outside of NC State and Georgia Tech. So they did a great job of not NC State and Georgia Tech, I'm sorry. They did a great job of shooting 2 games in a row, and then Louisville and NC State. So they sandwiched those right together. But the games before that, they were terrible.
Boston College and Virginia Tech. Yes.
Boston College and Virginia Tech. So the hope, I guess, is that the offense went down the roller coaster and now will go up it a little bit, because when they went to Clemson last year, it was one of the uglier non-Virginia offensive performances, that Carolina's had in some time. It was really, really bad. Now, obviously a different offensive system, but, Caleb Love and RJ Davis and Curran Walton and Leaky Black and Armando Bacot were in that game and played significant minutes in that game. So I guess the hope would just be that they could get back to what they were doing offensively. Hunter Tyson is out for
I saw
Clemson,
that shoulder.
which is a pretty big deal. One of their better players. And so really, if they can just shoot their kind of normal percentage and neutralize PJ Hall to some degree, then I do think they have a chance to win the game. But with this Carolina team, you don't know who's going to show up from one game to the next. So it could be the NC State team that shows up. It could be the Duke team. We'll just have to see on Tuesday.
Definitely hear you guys, though, and agree 100% on the types of shots they're taking. All right. We've said everything we can say about this current roster. Going to take a quick break, let the national guys come in here and run some ads. We're going to come right back and talk a little bit of recruiting stuff. There is some news. We do have some info. We'll share that with you as soon as we get back. Stick around to the Coast to Coast podcast on InsideCarolina.com. Sherrell, Gigi was Gigi was in the building for the Duke game on Saturday. I know that you have some information that you have posted on the premium message boards, but do you want to just kind of say, without giving away what you've learned, do you want to just say any basics or any generic high level stuff that our listeners might want to hear?
First off, we need a higher production budget so we can
Yes,
get
we do.
yeah, so we need to talk to Ben and Buck about that. But I would say that with Gigi, the most important thing for them, they wanted to come back to UNC for a game day atmosphere. So the times that they had been there previously, once last June, and then in October, one was just an unofficial visit, on a random Monday during the summer, right after quarantine ended or right after the moratorium on visits ended in June. So they're there for that, and it wasn't a lot going on campus. And then in October, they were there for late night in HD, which is a cool event. It's loud, lots of fans there, but it's still not a game. And so they wanted to be there for an actual game. They'd been to Duke for a game, in South Carolina for a game, in Georgetown for a game, but they hadn't experienced it at North Carolina. So that was kind of the reason that they decided to make the trip. And by all accounts, they enjoyed it. And as we said, the story is up on the premium site. You can check it out.
Yep. And obviously, if there's more, we will hit the reggaeton horns and blast those, and we'll give you more information. Sherrell, also UNC, two of UNC's 4 signees for next year were in the building: Seth Trimble, Tyler Nickel, and Jaron Stevenson made his second visit in what, 10 days, a week, something like that?
Yes, it's 4th of the season, I believe. So he's been a frequent visitor. Part of it is that he lives right down the street. He lives in Pittsburgh. So it's a very easy drive to get to the Smith Center. And, if a school is recruiting you and they're down the street, why wouldn't you take advantage of it? Gigi Jackson has done the same thing with South Carolina. So he's been a regular visitor to the Smith Center. It's kind of funny. The visitors from late night in HD were Seth Trimble, who was there for Duke, Jaron Stevenson, who was there for Duke, Gigi Jackson, who was there for Duke, and then Tyler Nickel was there as well. So a good group of recruits there, 2 signees and 2 players who were offered who they really want. Yeah, that's kind of how it went this weekend. And before anyone asks, because I know it's a question, one game for 99% of recruits doesn't mean anything. Now a season or 2 seasons or 3 seasons, yes, but 1 season doesn't, because all these guys are super confident, and what they're looking at is the guy who plays their position, what he's doing, what he's allowed to do, how he does it, and how he, the player might fit into what that particular player on the court is doing. So that was, I think, what all 4 of those guys did. And for UNC, Brady Manick had a pretty good game. He's a 4. And North Carolina's talked to Gigi specifically about, kind of playing anything from 3 through 5. So that would be Leaky, Manick, and then Baycott.
Well, and it's also really cool that you pointed out the nucleus of these four kids who, may or may not have a chance to play together, based on what their plans are. But that's really cool to see that those guys have spent some time together. All right, so for this coming week, with the Florida State coming to town, North Carolina hosting them, it sounds like we're also going to have another one of the commits for next year, one of the signees for next year coming in, and then another prospect who's making his second trip to Chapel Hill. You want to talk about him a little bit, or talk about those guys a little bit?
Yeah, Jalen Washington will be taking his senior year official. So for those not familiar, you can take up to 5 official visits as a junior, and those go from basically the start of your junior season to, I believe, July 31st, the summer after your junior season. And then you can take 5 as a senior as well, from August 1st until you graduate. And Jalen Washington took his visit back in June, committed to UNC in July, and then hasn't been back to Chapel Hill since, partly because of the surgery he had, but partly because he lives in Indiana and just hasn't been able to be back. But he'll be in the Smith Center on Saturday. And then Cam Scott, who visited for the Georgia Tech game a few weeks back, will also be in attendance. This will be his second game in 3 weeks. He is a 2024 wing from Lexington, South Carolina.
Yeah, and so I want to talk about that a little bit. Sean, I'll bring you back in for this. I think one of the big things that North Carolina fans have seen, despite the outcomes of some games this year, what you have seen is that Hubert Davis' system is really going to rely heavily on, what has been a stretch 4, where now it's just a 4 that can shoot. And when you have that sort of asset in your arsenal, it's going to make Hubert Davis's offense work a lot better. A guy like Cam Scott, talk about what you've seen watching his game, and then why players like that are going to be so important in upcoming recruiting classes for Hubert Davis to have success.
Yeah, Cam Scott is definitely a guy I want to watch a little bit more of from a full game perspective, but you got to love what you see from the highlights. He had, now granted was playing U15 as a freshman, so a lot of guys will play U16, but he did play with Jaron Stevenson on Team United in EYBL, and he had very good numbers and very efficient numbers. So that's something good to see at that young age. But I think for him, I mean, he's a smooth wing scorer that is athletic and can shoot the ball. And I think we've talked about UNC missing that really over the last handful of years. So I think being able to get an explosive wing scorer is going to be crucial to Hubert's success in the long run. And you mentioned stretch four. I think that's really the key, just in terms of anybody going forward. If you're going to lose the offensive rebounding advantage that Carolina possessed all these years, right now they kind of have half the puzzle made with Brady on offense and the ability to stretch the floor, knock down threes, but you're still missing. We talked about it before. You're still missing on defense, where you're basically starting, two centers on defense. So of course there's going to be that mismatch. And if you can get, a legit four that is not gonna, you can put them in pick and rolls, you can put them in switches, you eliminate the ability to attack, mismatches. That is the key to the future, is getting that on both sides of the ball. Right now we have it on one, but as we saw that's still where teams want to attack on when they're on offense, and that is, I think, why Gigi, obviously his talent, but a key to almost getting, for Duke it was Jabari Parker, and for UNC I think it's Gigi Jackson, of getting somebody very talented in that position that can play both sides of the ball.
All right, fellas, give you your last chance before we put a bow on this show for this week. As always, I love what you guys bring. This is fun for me, and that's really all that matters, right? Is how much does Joey enjoy this? But you guys know I look forward to this every Sunday night, and I'm lucky that Inside Carolina lets us do this. So I appreciate you guys bringing the insight and the perspective, even when the results of the week are not as fun to talk about. Anything else y'all want to mention before we get out of here, Sean? What are you working on? How's that? What's coming soon from the mind of Moran?
Sounds like a really awesome blog, Mind of Moran.
The Mind of Moran, or a new Netflix series, sci-fi series. Yeah.
Not 2 weeks ago we had the videos on Trimble and Nickel. I think just continuing to watch them. Maybe we'll get back with Wiltshire, because he has a few games coming up. So I think just digging into them more, because all they're going to be obviously extremely important to how next year goes. But I think once again, it could have easily been an 0-2 week, which I think is was worst case scenario when we recorded this. This last week, I think 1-1 probably expectations. I think they need to be 2-0 when we're doing this next week, or it'll be viewed as another frustrating week. And right now they're ranked around 45 in KenPom, and as you said, there's not a lot of Q1 wins coming up, so you got to at least keep stringing the wins together and not racking up the losses, given the deficiencies that'll be in their resume come a month from now.
Well, and if we've also learned that if UNC does not have a 2-0 week this week, then all of Sherrell's octogenarian friends are going to be struggling with their nerve medicine, because that's what he was talking about earlier, about all the people he talks to, the Carolina fans, just say that it gets their nerves messed up. But Sherrell, anything else you want to add before we get out of here, man?
That wasn't whole pool. My grandma Gatsy Rich, back in the day, she just had this huge container, and I don't even know
like the big Sam's container.
Yeah,
but yeah,
it was just a huge container and just huge pills, and she called them her nerve pills. I don't know what they were actually designed to do, but they were her nerve.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
If Granny said they work, man, they work.
Exactly. The only thing I have, I like to keep track of this number each week. So conference only defense. North Carolina was number 3 last week. and they are tied for fourth now with Clemson. So they fell. They were number one for a while, fell to 2, fell to 3, fell to 5, got back up to 3, and now are tied for fourth after that performance on Saturday. So interesting tracking that. I still can't believe they're in the top half of the ACC in conference only defense, but I think maybe that's
that shows the
partly,
ACC, right?
yeah,
that
tells
an
you a lot about the
indictment of the
ACC.
league.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and then their schedule, I guess, has been pretty favorable thus far. So just always something to watch. And then the other stat we said to watch was the assist to field goals made, and you just look at that for Duke, and I can tell you a lot about how they were moving the ball and how the offense got going.
Yeah, Duke looked like they were getting everything they wanted at the beginning of both halves. It was clinical. Sean, I know you said you were done, but maybe you have one more thing you want to throw out there.
Well, yeah, just piggybacking on Sherrell, because I was looking at that earlier today in terms of conference only numbers, and yet, defense, they're tied with Clemson, but obviously what jumps out is that turnover percentage, dead last in the conference. So, nothing has changed from, prior to conference play to now in terms of the inability to generate turnovers, which obviously can create easier baskets offensively. But then the other thing, offensively, there's similar number 5, but once again, going back to that 2-point percentage, they're 14th. And you look at the numbers and you're like, Brady's shooting well, Armando's shooting well, RJ's decent. And once again, goes back to Caleb's 28% in conference play and his ability to figure out what are shots he can make. Obviously, you're not going to make everything, but what are shots you can make? And I think for him, that's, kind of that pull-up jump shot is where he showed he was comfortable last year. Because once he kind of gets into no man's land, it's basically a turnover.
When you've only got 5 guys getting significant minutes, if one of those guys has a 28% mark, it's going to kill everybody.
Yep.
But hey, that's as much math as I want to talk about for the week. All right, fellas, as always, you guys bring so much to the show. I know Inside Carolina subscribers appreciate it. And hopefully, to show their appreciation, they will rate and review this here podcast, because that really helps us. And again, if you don't like what we're doing, hey, shoot me a note on the message boards, or hit us up on Twitter or social media. Just let us know, your comments and your thoughts. But we certainly hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Coast to Coast. We'll be right back, same time, same place next week, talking about the week that was. Hopefully we'll have some insight about any recruiting developments, but you guys know that's what Sean and Sherrell bring every week. So we appreciate it. Again, bang that rate review button, hit that subscribe button, make sure you're getting all this sent directly to your device so you can get it as soon as it drops. But for Sean Moran, for Sherrell McMillan, I'm Joey Powell. This has been the Coast to Coast podcast here on InsideCarolina.com. Late.